Hey everybody, it's me, Peter, and today we're talking about Fences.
Can I ask you a question? How come you ain't never liked me?
Fences is based on a stage play. The problem with movies that are based on plays is that the film restricts itself to using one location for about 90% of the film. And there's nothing inherently wrong with having only one location for a film, except that the movie becomes extremely dialogue heavy. It's not a very ideal environment for visual storytelling, which is probably why Denzel Washington didn't get nominated for Best Director. It is, however, an extremely ideal environment for an actor looking to give a really great performance. And that's exactly what happened. Both Viola Davis and Denzel Washington give phenomenal performances in this movie. And they have to. They both have to be really great actors in order to carry a film with extremely long-winded dialogue. Generally, in dialogue-heavy films, the plot is moved forward by stories that the characters are telling rather than what's actually happening on screen. And while that limits them in a lot of ways, it also kind of broadens what they want to talk about. They talk about different generations, they talk about what it was like when they were younger, and this gives some really interesting perspective. It allows you to look at these people's lives from generation to generation because of Denzel's stories about his father. The movie ends up kind of teaching you a lot about appreciation for the people in your life. Appreciating the people that have a large impact on your life. As a whole, I wasn't the biggest fan of this movie just because it seemed like a stage play. A lot of these movies that are based off of plays, it's just a little too obvious that it's a play. It feels almost out of place, like it should be on a stage and it shouldn't be in a movie. I think that it's just scenes where people are talking on the porch and then it shows somebody in the kitchen listening, and I'm just imagining that on a stage where there's just a little dividing wall between the kitchen and the porch, and the person kind of, walks into the kitchen and moves their head a little bit so that you can tell that they're listening in, and it just kind of ends up looking a little bit ridiculous on film. Not that it looked ridiculous on film, but I'm imagining the play while I'm watching the movie, and it feels out of place. It feels too obvious to me that this was adapted from a play. That being said, the dialogue is fantastic. There's a lot of really interesting ideologies and philosophies. You can really tell the character that Denzel Washington plays is supposed to be very, very intelligent. He's not very well educated, but he is extremely intelligent. And he comes off that way. He comes off very intelligent. Viola Davis comes off very intelligent. Their acting and their ability to deliver these great stories and these great ideas is really the shining star in this movie. I kind of wish that there was more that could be said visually, or that there was more to be said with the camera, but I don't think that there was a lot of room to be creative with the camera. I think that there were just too many restrictions just with the location and with how heavy the dialogue was. There's only so much that you can do to say more than what's already being said by the dialogue. So it was a good movie. It was very well done. It was extremely well acted. I think that the only thing getting in my way with this movie is personal preference. And I try and keep personal preference out of it when I'm analyzing a film. Generally speaking, I feel like once my preference comes into play, it immediately makes me unqualified to analyze the movie. It's like a food critic not liking onions, and then he just happens to get served a dish with onions, and he's like, oh, this dish is terrible. It's like, no, it's not a terrible dish, you just don't like onions, stupid. So it was a really well-made film, and I can appreciate it for what it is. I just usually don't care for when a movie is based off of a play. A lot of times it's just too much like a play and not enough like a movie. So now I'm going to get into the spoiler review. If you haven't seen Fences yet, I suggest checking it out before finishing this review. What was really interesting about this movie was the ending. The ending seemed to focus a lot of emphasis on appreciating the people in your life, appreciating the impact, the positive impact that somebody has on your life. Denzel Washington's character is supposed to have died, and they're getting ready to go to his funeral, and there's this really big emphasis on how great he was and how much of a positive impact he had on them. And I just spent 2 hours with the guy, and he was a total jerk, so I don't know what they're talking about. But the more that I looked back at the movie, the more I realized that he did have a positive impact on them. He talks about how abusive his father was and how his father didn't care about him enough to make sure there was a roof over his head or food in his stomach. And this is something that's very important to him personally. It's very important to him that his children are fed and have a roof over their heads. It's very important to him that he does for them what his father never did for him. And at first, I looked at his dream to be a baseball player as a missed opportunity. He went after his dream and he failed. But then I kind of started to realize that this is the ideal that he was trying to instill in his children. He wanted them to think realistically. He wanted them to stop chasing their dreams and think about doing something practical, something that's going to support their families, try and support their lives. He wasn't around for when his eldest son was growing up because he was in prison. And so his eldest son never really got that from him. He ended up chasing his dream of becoming a musician without ever stopping to realize that it's finished and he needs to think about his family, he needs to get a job, and he needs to be practical about this. He needs to be realistic. Corey, the second son, did get this from his dad. His methods may have been harsh. He may have been extremely hard on him. It may have seemed like an extremely negative impact he had on his son, but ultimately his son was better for it. This was all kind of reinforced by what the eldest son says at the end of the movie. He says that their father always used to say, "You have to take the crookeds with the straights." There was a lot of negative that came from Denzel's character raising these kids, but a lot of positive came out of it. And it was important to the mother, Viola Davis's character, that Corey realized that. It was important to her that he appreciates what his father did for him. Just because it was hard doesn't mean that it wasn't good. You have to take the crookeds with the straights. So ultimately, it was a pretty good movie. Denzel Washington's performance was great. Viola Davis's performance was amazing. I really got attached to the characters. You know, the characters were very relatable. You cared about them. You end up liking both of the sons. You end up liking Denzel, even though he's a jerk for most of the movie. You end up really liking him. He has this way of starting out talking about these really horrible, awful things that happened to him in his life, and then ending it with a joke that is legitimately funny and you can't help but laugh about it. He has a friend too who comes over a lot, and his name's like Mr. Bono or something, Bono. And he's a lot of fun too. He seems very genuine. He seems like you know him. He's kind of the conscience. You know, he's kind of the Jiminy Cricket in this movie. So that's all I could think to say about Fences. What did you think of Fences? Is there anything that I missed? Let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoy my review, then don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.